At exactly 11:42 AM UTC, something vanished. Not a city, not a satellite, not a signal. It was subtler than that. Earth's shadow disappeared. Across observatories in Chile, Namibia, Hawaii, and Antarctica, astronomers noticed the same impossible anomaly at the same moment. Objects were no longer casting shadows. Not fully, not partially, but incorrectly. Mountains cast shadows that pointed in the wrong direction. Clouds projected outlines that didn't match their shapes. Even skyscrapers appeared detached from the darkness beneath them, as if light itself had lost its sense of direction. At first, scientists suspected a solar flare. But the sun was calm, perfectly calm. No coronal mass ejection, no magnetic storm, no atmospheric distortion. And yet the shadows remained wrong. Then came the videos. A teacher in Brazil placed a pencil on a desk. The pencil's shadow split into two, one correct, one delayed, as if reality itself was buffering. In Canada, a drone hovered above a frozen lake. The drone cast a shadow. The lake did not. Within an hour, the phrase, shadow failure, trended globally. Government stayed silent. Because behind closed doors, something far more unsettling was emerging. Satellite data revealed that Earth's shadow, the massive cone of darkness cast into space, had shifted. Not gradually, not naturally, it had jumped, as if the planet had briefly existed somewhere else, and then snapped back. Physicists ran simulations. Every model failed. According to known laws of physics, Earth could not lose alignment with its shadow without altering its orbit, rotation, or mass. None of those had changed, which meant only one possibility remained. The light itself had been altered, not bent, not scattered, rewritten. As night fell, the phenomenon worsened. City lights began projecting shadows that lagged behind moving objects, sometimes by seconds, sometimes by minutes. People reported a disturbing sensation, walking forward while their shadow hesitated, then followed. By midnight, observatories detected something chilling. The missing portion of Earth's shadow hadn't vanished, it had moved. Positioned precisely where Earth's shadow would be in the future. A projection, a placeholder. A forecast. Someone or something wasn't blocking the light. It was previewing a different version of Earth. And for the first time in human history, scientists had to consider a question once reserved for philosophy. What if reality doesn't break? What if it updates? By the second day, scientists stopped calling it an anomaly. They started calling it behavior. Because the shadows weren't just wrong anymore, they were learning. Across the world, researchers noticed a disturbing consistency. Wherever Earth's shadow lagged or split, it wasn't random. The delay always matched a future position of the object casting it. A moving car's shadow appeared where the car was about to be. A walking person's shadow stepped forward before they did. Light wasn't reacting, it was predicting. At CERN, physicists ran emergency tests on particle beams. When photons were fired through controlled chambers, detectors recorded something impossible. The light arrived before it was emitted, not by milliseconds, by measurable, repeatable fractions of time. Every attempt to explain it using relativity collapsed. Because relativity allows time distortion, not time memory. Meanwhile, satellites orbiting Earth began sending corrupted data. Images of the planet showed something no one had ever seen. Earth had two shadows in space. One aligned with the sun, correct, expected. The other, slightly ahead of Earth's orbital path. A shadow cast by a position Earth hadn't reached yet. A future silhouette. As this realization spread, panic quietly replaced curiosity. Because shadows are not objects, they are consequences. And consequences cannot exist before causes, unless causality itself has been edited. Then came the blackout event. For exactly 37 seconds, cities across multiple continents reported the same phenomenon. Artificial lights failed to create shadows at all. Street lamps illuminated streets, but objects beneath them cast nothing. No darkness, no outline, just light passing through reality as if depth had been temporarily removed. People described it as walking inside a photograph. Flat, unanchored, wrong. During the blackout, every major physics lab received the same signal. Not through the internet, not via satellites, but embedded inside raw sensor noise. A repeating mathematical structure, not a message. A checksum, the kind used to verify data integrity. The implication was terrifying. Reality wasn't malfunctioning. It was being validated. and something was checking whether the current version still matched a stored reference. Then, without warning, shadows snapped back into place, perfectly aligned, perfectly normal, as if nothing had ever happened. But scientists knew better, because when they compared data logs, they found something chilling. The normal shadows were now offset by an immeasurable but permanent fraction. Reality had not returned, it had advanced, and buried deep inside the recovered signal was one final discovery: a timestamp embedded in the noise. Not from the past, not from the present, but from 93 years in the future, which meant only one conclusion remained. Earth wasn't losing its shadow. It was receiving information from a version of itself that had already lived through what was coming, and chose to warn us and using light. By the third day, humanity realized the shadow anomaly was no longer just a visual glitch. It was spreading. Hospitals reported something impossible. X-rays were returning inconsistent depth readings. Bones appeared slightly displaced from surrounding tissue, as if the body existed in layers that no longer aligned. In laboratories, lasers fired at solid objects returned echoes that didn't match the distance traveled. Reality had lost its depth, not everywhere, not evenly, but selectively. In some cities, shadows lagged by minutes. In others, they arrived before the object moved. Children noticed it first. They waved their hands and laughed when the shadow copied them wrong. Parents stopped laughing when the shadow corrected itself, without the hand moving again. At universities, physicists ran a terrifying comparison. They overlaid the current shadow behavior with simulations of relativistic delay, gravitational lensing, and quantum decoherence. None fit until someone tried something radical. They treated the shadow not as an absence of light, but as information. When shadows were analyzed as data streams rather than optical effects, a pattern emerged. Every delayed shadow shared the same mathematical signature. Every misplaced shadow followed the same offset rules. Every wrong shadow obeyed one logic. Not physics, compression. The shadows weren't failing. They were being simplified, like a system reducing resolution to save resources. That's when satellites detected the second anomaly. Earth's night side, and the true planetary shadow, was no longer smooth. It flickered, pixelated, as if parts of it were being rendered at different levels of detail. Astronauts aboard the ISS sent a message that never aired publicly. We can see the shadow changing shape behind us. It's not continuous anymore, it's segmented. On Earth, people began reporting a disturbing sensation. Standing still while feeling slightly ahead of themselves, like their presence arrived before their body. Traffic cameras captured vehicles entering intersections before their shadows followed. Security footage showed shadows slipping through doorways milliseconds after the doors closed. Time wasn't breaking, sequence was. Then came the global synchronization event. At exactly 02 UTC, every shadow on Earth froze for 1 full second. Humans did not, people moved. Birds flew, cars drove, but shadows stayed locked in place. For 1 second, the world had no proof of depth, and then, all shadows snapped back at once. Perfectly aligned, perfectly normal, as if nothing had happened except the instruments disagreed. Every sensor recorded the same impossible conclusion. For 1 second, Earth had rendered itself without shadows. A test, a preview, a calibration, and buried deep in the data was a chilling timestamp, not from the present, but from a future Earth date. The shadows weren't malfunctioning, they were rehearsing. By the third night, the world stopped arguing about what the phenomenon was, because the shadows began to arrive early. In New York, a woman walking home at sunset noticed something impossible. Her shadow reached the end of the street before she did. In Mumbai, CCTV footage showed people stepping into their own shadows, shadows that were already waiting on the pavement. In Oslo, a child ran toward a wall. The shadow hit first. The body followed seconds later. This wasn't delay, it wasn't lag. It was inversion. Light-speed instruments confirmed it. The shadows were no longer reacting to objects. They were predicting them. Meanwhile, space agencies made a discovery they didn't release to the public. Earth's shadow in space, the massive cone of darkness stretching millions of kilometers behind the planet, was no longer aligned with Earth's present position. It was aligned with Earth's future orbit, a shadow cast by a position the planet had not yet reached. According to physics, this was impossible. According to mathematics, it was precise, as if reality itself had rendered the next frame early. Then came the alignment event. At exactly 02:16 UTC, Every shadow on Earth snapped into perfect synchronization. No delays, no splits, no distortions. For 30 seconds, the planet looked normal again. People cheered, news anchors smiled. Scientists exhaled, and then the sun dimmed. Not in brightness, but in certainty. Light sensors detected something chilling. Photons arriving at Earth were carrying temporal noise. Not damage, not decay. Information encoded fluctuations buried inside the light itself. A message traveling inside illumination. When decoded, the pattern matched something no one expected. A planetary simulation model, not predicting Earth's future or recording it. The model showed Earth 27 hours ahead of the present moment. Same cities, same oceans, same clouds, but one thing was missing: the shadow. In the future frame, Earth cast none at all, as if light no longer recognized the planet as an obstacle, as if Earth had become transparent to reality. Then, for the first time since the event began, the shadows moved on their own. They detached. Across streets, walls, forests, and deserts, shadows slid away from their objects and began drifting eastward, slowly, deliberately, following the invisible curve of Earth's orbit. People watched in silence as darkness abandoned form. A question spread faster than panic. If the shadow represents where we block the light, what happens when the universe stops recognizing us as solid? At observatories, a final calculation appeared on screens worldwide. The time difference between Earth and its shadow was shrinking. Rapidly, hours became minutes. Minutes became seconds. Earth was catching up to something, or something was catching up to Earth. And when the countdown reached 0, there would be no shadow left to warn us, only the update itself. At 03:19 UTC, the shadows stopped lagging. They didn't correct themselves, they vanished. Across the planet, light touched objects, but darkness no longer followed. People stood beneath streetlights and saw nothing at their feet. Cars drove without silhouettes. Trees reached toward the sky with no imprint on the ground below. Earth had become visually impossible. Astronomers confirmed the unthinkable. Earth's umbra, the vast shadow the planet casts into space, was no longer connected to Earth at all. It existed independently, detached, stable, perfect, a shadow without a source. Satellites tracked it, drifting ahead of Earth's orbit, not randomly but precisely, occupying the position Earth would reach 13 hours later. Humanity wasn't losing its shadow, it was chasing it, and then the data changed tone. Light sensors worldwide detected a subtle anomaly. Photons arriving before they were emitted. Effect before cause. Reality had reversed a step. Physicists whispered the same conclusion, afraid to say it aloud. Time wasn't broken. It was layered. The shadow ahead wasn't darkness. It was a recording, a future Earth imprinting itself backward into the present. At dawn, something unprecedented happened. People began noticing moments repeating. Not whole minutes, not seconds, but decisions. A hand raised twice before the thought formed. A sentence heard internally before it was spoken. A turn taken before the intention existed. The shadowless Earth wasn't failing, it was synchronizing. At 09 Shorai UTC, observatories detected alignment, Earth's position, the detached shadow, and the projected future shadow. All three overlapped for 0.7 seconds. During that overlap, every clock on Earth paused. Every atomic oscillator froze. Every GPS satellite lost time reference. And humanity felt it. A pressureless stillness, like reality holding its breath. Then the shadows returned, perfectly aligned. Perfectly normal, but something was wrong. They were sharper, more precise. As if recalculated, scientists compared pre-event and post-event data and reached a conclusion that chilled every discipline. Physical constants had shifted, microscopically, but universally. Gravity, light propagation, quantum noise. Reality hadn't been repaired, it had been updated. The shadow event wasn't a malfunction. It was a compatibility check. Earth had momentarily overlapped with a future version of itself, one that required different rules to exist. And for the first time in history, the present had been forced to comply. There was no warning, no message, no explanation, just a quiet confirmation. The future had arrived early, and it had checked whether Earth was ready. The shadows now follow us again, but they no longer feel like reflections. They feel like reminders, because if reality can preview what comes next, then the next update won't ask for permission.